Hi, I'm Andrew from Parlogram, and in this video I'll be looking at the Kinks' second album, Kinda Kinks. Now this album isn't one that gets talked about as much as the ones that followed, but I've always found it a really interesting record because you can hear the band starting to change. They're still fundamentally the same raw R&B group we heard on You Really Got Me, but Ray Davies is beginning to write differently. It's not a perfect album, and it was put together very quickly, but it captures the Kinks at a moment when things were beginning to change. By early 1965, everything was moving very quickly for the Kinks. In the space of just a few months, they'd gone from playing clubs and dance halls to having two major hit singles, with You Really Got Me and All Day and All of the Night, and were now in constant demand. There were tours, television appearances, radio sessions, and at the same time pressure from Pi to deliver a second album while the band was still at the height of their popularity. All Day and All of the Night had come out in October 1964 and was still a huge hit. And in early 1965, they also put out the Kinks-Size Session EP, which included tracks that don't appear on this album at all. So even as Kinda Kinks was being put together, some of their strongest material was being released separately. And that's important because it helps explain why the album can feel a little uneven. Unlike some of the other albums that would follow, this wasn't a carefully planned record. It was made alongside everything else that was going on. Recording sessions were squeezed in between live dates, and most of the album was completed in a very short space of time in February 1965 at Pi Studios in London. In fact, several of the tracks were recorded over just a few days. At the same time, some of the songs had been recorded earlier during sessions in late 1964. Tired of Waiting for You, the album's hit single, actually dates back to August 1964. So rather than being recorded as a single unified project, Kinda Kinks is really a collection of sessions from different points in time, and that slightly rushed feel is something you can hear when you listen to the album. When you listen to Kinda Kinks, one of the first things you notice is that it doesn't sound quite the same as their debut. The raw, aggressive sound of You Really Got Me is still there in places, but it's no longer the whole story. The songs on here are more melodic, and you can hear Ray Davies starting to move beyond that early R&B sound. And for me, that's where this album becomes interesting. Tired of Waiting for You was released as a single in January 1965 and became the band's second #1 in the UK. It's a very different kind of record from their earlier hits. It's slower and much more about melody and mood. There's still a simplicity to it, and I think this is one of the first songs where you really hear Ray Davies as a songwriter, rather than someone who's just writing riffs for a band. Interestingly, he later said that he didn't think much of the song at the time, but it connected with people in a way that perhaps even he didn't expect. And that shift continues across some of the other tracks on the album. Songs like Something Better Beginning and Nothing in the World Can Stop Me Worrying About That Girl have a very different feel from the band's earlier material. They're more reflective, and for me, they're among the strongest moments on the record. I've always particularly liked Nothing in the World Can Stop Me Worrying About That Girl. It's a simple song, but there's something about the mood of it that feels very natural, and it points quite clearly towards the direction Ray would take later in the decade. At the same time, the album hasn't completely left the early Kinks sound behind. There are still tracks here that feel much closer to their R&B roots. Songs like Come On Now, Look For Me Baby and Naggin' Woman still have that energy of a band playing to a crowd in a dance hall, and I think that's part of the character of the album. Another interesting thing about Kinda Kinks is that it still feels like a band effort. On the earlier material, and even here to some extent, the Kinks still sound like a group working things out together, rather than being a band built around one songwriter. Dave Davies is still an important part of the sound, both through his guitar playing and his contributions to the album. He even gets a writing credit here with Got My Feet on the Ground, which adds a bit of variety to the record. At the same time, you can hear Ray starting to take more control, not just as a songwriter, but in the way the songs are put together. There's more attention to melody, and the arrangements are beginning to serve the song rather than just the performance. The way this album was recorded also plays a part in how it sounds. Producer Shel Talmy liked to work quickly, often recording tracks in just a few takes with very little overdubbing. What I find particularly interesting is that around this time, Ray Davies was already writing songs that went beyond what we hear on this album. There are demos from 1965 with titles like I Go to Sleep and This Strange Effect, which show him moving towards a more personal and distinctive style. And when you listen to those alongside Kinda Kinks, you get the sense that the album is only part of the story. One thing that's worth keeping in mind with Kinda Kinks is that in 1965, albums weren't always the main event. For British bands in particular, singles were still the priority, and if you only look at this album on its own, you don't quite get the full picture of what the Kinks were doing at this point. Around the same time, they were also releasing standalone singles like Everybody's Gonna Be Happy, which didn't appear on the album. Then there was the Kinks-Size Session EP, which also included tracks that weren't on the album. So if you take all that material together, you get a much stronger and more complete view of the band in early 1965, and that helps explain why Kinda Kinks can feel a little uneven on its own. Despite all of that, the album still performed well and reached number 3 in the UK, the same position as their debut. In the US, it only reached number 60, 30 places lower than the first. Part of that is down to the way the material was released there. Instead of issuing the album as it appeared in the UK, Reprise put out a different version under the title Kinks-Size. Several of the UK tracks were removed, including Something Better Beginning and Nothing in the World Can Stop Me Worrying About That Girl and So Long, and replaced them with earlier singles and tracks from the Kinks-Size Session EP. So rather than highlighting the direction Ray Davies was starting to move in, the American version leans much more towards the band's earlier R&B sound. Although Kinda Kinks was later issued in the US, it still wasn't the same as the UK album. American listeners had already been given a different version of this material through Kinks-Size. From a collector's point of view, unlike the debut, the album was never mixed into stereo, so it exists in mono only. First pressings came on the Cerise Pink Pie label, typically with A1-B1 matrices, and they're highly sought after today. They're housed in front-laminated tri-flip-back sleeves manufactured by Garrett & Lofthouse. The cover is quite a step up from their debut. It's brighter, more polished, and feels more in line with the band's new chart success. The photo presents the group in a more commercial, almost pop-orientated way, compared with the tougher image of the first album. Like many albums from this period, they were played heavily, so finding a clean, unmolested copy today can be both difficult and expensive. Thankfully, modern reissues like this one are excellent sounding and not expensive. So if you're interested in getting hold of a good sounding modern pressing, I'll put a link to where I got this one from in the description. The album was reissued on Pie's budget Marble Arch label in 1969, which made the album more widely available at a lower price. As annoying as these cheap reissues might have been for the group, this is actually how many listeners first encountered the Kinks. So while Kinda Kinks might not be the most polished album in the Kinks catalogue, it's a very revealing one. They were still that energetic R&B group that had broken through with You Really Got Me, and you can hear that side of them throughout this record. But at the same time, Ray Davies was already beginning to move in a different direction. And for me, that's what makes this album worth coming back to. It's not just about where the Kinks had been, it's about where they were about to go. And that next step would arrive later in 1965 with their third album, The Kink Controversy, which we'll be looking at in our next Kinks video. In the meantime, if you're interested in going deeper into this period of the Kinks' history, I'd highly recommend this book by Doug Hinman and Andrew Sandoval. It's been an invaluable resource while putting these videos together, and it goes into incredible detail on the band's recording sessions, releases, and day-to-day activity from their beginnings up to 1971. It's available exclusively from beatlambooks.com, and I'll leave a link in the description if you'd like to check it out. And if you do, you can get a $15 discount on your order by using the code Parlogram15. I'll be back next weekend with the next episode with the students, where they listen to another Beatles album for the first time. But that's all for this one, so I'll say bye for now, and thanks for watching.